Hello and welcome to the Car Carolina channel live stream. Well, before we start, let me make sure you guys can hear me well. Anybody can respond in the chat. Let's see. I suppose you can hear me well. So, let's start with the questions. Make sure this is working. Yep. Let's start with the questions. So, Ruben Costa says, do you know about Toyota D4D, the diesel engines? Unfortunately, I don't have experience with the diesel engines. In the United States, they're not sold by Toyota, so I wouldn't be able to give you any information on that. Earskin Presley says, my son wants to purchase a 2016 Toyota Prius. Is this a good, reliable vehicle and smart buy? I think they are, actually. The fourth generation Prius has been very reliable so far. Few minor recalls here, nothing major. We've seen some pretty high mileage ones. We've seen some taxis actually well over 100,000 already. We haven't had any big issues with them, as long as, of course, the maintenance is kept and everything is taken care of. All right. Potla Sayer, guys, I'm sorry if I don't read your name right. I do apologize. I'm not very good at that. Question says, why my Toyota Corolla 2017 is shaking at 600 RPM in drive mode. It has 69K, but when it is at 800 RPM, it does not shake. So on your Corolla, the first thing I would do is try to clean the throttle body, because 600 RPM is a little bit on the lower side of RPM. You might want to clean the throttle body. It's a service that I actually recommend you do regularly, every 25, 30, 35, even up to 50,000 miles. I will be working on a video on how to do that soon if you're interested in doing that yourself, DIY. I have a Boiled Nuts. Thank you for your super chat. Hi AMD. Without having a lift, are the engine coolant easily accessible for the 2GR FXE? So they are, but you might have a little bit of a hard time removing the covers underneath the car to expose the drains, but it's nothing really impossible, especially on if we're talking about a Highlander here, FXE, I'm assuming this is a hybrid, it's going to be a little bit of a higher car, so you can maybe crawl underneath it, get the covers off so you can drain the coolant. And actually, I am working on a video on how to bleed the coolant out of a 2GR. There's a specific procedure for that, so stay tuned for that one. But yeah, it's very possible without a lift. So Naveen says, could you post the part number for the panel roof stripping you mentioned in your video on the latest Gen Camry? I will add it as a comment, and I'm sorry I did not add it to that video. I agree with you, but at the moment I'd have to look up in my paperwork and get that part number. So I'll do that, and I'll post it as a comment, and I'll pin it on the video for the Camry. Or if you want, send me an email and I'll get that to you faster. Moving on, Susan says, can you speak on the issues of 2020 RAV4 Hybrid experiencing dead batteries and trying to start up ignition, possibly due to parasitic drain of the battery? Many discussions. Yes. So the 19, I believe in 2020, so far no 2021s, there's an issue with something called the DCM, Data Communications Module, essentially a fancy cell phone for the Safety Connect. That has a problem of staying on when the car is off. It should turn off after a little bit, after like up to 20 minutes, it should shut off completely. Well, it's not shutting off, it's staying on and draining batteries overnight. There is a software update that fixes that. It's something very simple the dealership can do. It's under warranty. Once the software update is done, we did not have any issues with batteries draining. And while the car is at the dealership, by the way, and this is the part that most skip, the battery needs to be tested. Some of these batteries, from continuous draining like that, they actually fail and they get replaced under warranty. So that's another factor. If the battery is not failed, then you would need to at least charge it up to 100%. So we're not talking about the hybrid battery. We're talking about the 12-volt battery here. So yeah, that's a common problem, and it has a fix. It's not really a big fix or involved. It's very simple, actually. We have another super chat from Jamie. Hello, I have a Camry 2013 with 70K. It does vibrate when driving between 15 and 40 miles an hour. I rotated tires, balanced them, aligned them. What could it be? So when you say vibrate, does it vibrate on acceleration, under braking, or just normal driving? If it vibrates under very light acceleration, if you step on it a little bit, it goes away. That could be actually the torque converter, which is somewhat very common on these. Um, Other issues: bent wheels, bent axles. I mean, this is the kind of diagnosis that needs to be done in person, but I would look for sources of vibration. It's not just the balance of the wheels. If the wheels are bent, some balancers won't pick on that. So you have to visually inspect the wheels. Are they bent? Rotate them. Usually put the car on the lift, turn the wheels, make sure nothing is bent. And bent axles also do that. I highly doubt it if it hasn't been an accident or something major impact. They don't just get bent on their own, but wheels, potholes, stuff like that also bends them. So I would go after wheels and then axles. But the first thing is it a torque converter shutter? If it happens only when you accelerate lightly in those speeds, and then when you accelerate harder, it goes away, then it's a torque converter. It's a very known problem with these. All right. So Frank, hello from Sydney, Australia. Hey, man. Thank you for joining us. So Armando says, what maintenance would you recommend on a Lexus ES330 to 04 100K with timing belt, water pump? Well, if the water pump has not and the timing belt has not been done, I recommend you do them. These are every 90,000 miles. Honestly, these cars, they're really good cars. They're very reliable. Other than general maintenance, coolant, if you're going to do the water pump, that's going to get done. Spark plugs, if they have never been replaced, that's a car over 10 years old, I would replace them. Put a new PCV valve if you're doing the spark plugs. Do a general inspection on all the components of the car. Nothing, any oil leaks, attend to them, any suspension issues. But if this is not a rust belt car, you're not going to find much. These things are very reliable. So Mike says, do you know about the battery fan for the Sienna hybrid? Yes. So the high voltage battery fan is located underneath the seat, the front seats. This is actually the first hybrid that has the battery fan, actually the whole hybrid battery in front of the front seat, which is an interesting location. Usually they were always in the back, but this one has it underneath the front seat. And the fan is also underneath. There's actually two fans underneath the front seat. There are two filters. As soon as you open the driver's door, look down, you'll see a vent that has a filter behind it. Same thing on the passenger front side. Moving on. Let's see. Any comments on the recent hefty fines to Toyota concerning emissions? I cannot really get into that. That's taken up with Toyota. I don't really know the details of that. Loose Cannon says, I'm a tech from Canada. What's the carbon buildup looking like as the mileage increase on the newer four-cylinder hybrids? Are the 4 multi-port injectors solving the issues of direct injection? So honestly, we have not seen issues with carbon buildup on the D4S systems yet. And I say yet. I'm hoping we don't get to, unlike some of the early Lexuses that only had direct injections, which were notorious for carbon buildup. Look, folks, with direct injection only engines, it's unfortunately, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when they carbon up. It's just the nature of it. That's why Toyota didn't continue to use those direct injection engines only. Some of the German manufacturers still do, and it's a disaster. But Toyota's added the port injection as well, and we have not seen any issues. We've seen isolated issues with the direct injectors themselves causing misfires, but they're not large scale or something massive or continuous, and usually had to do with bad maintenance or bad gas. But yeah, we don't have any issues yet of those. Now, carbon buildup can happen to any car, even if it doesn't have direct injection, by the way. This is a common misconception. Drive it the wrong conditions, it's going to carbon up. That's just the way it is. But normal driving, normal good maintenance, you should not get carbon buildup with cars. David says, what are the differences between Toyotas made in Japan, USA? Is quality control better? Now, this is widely speculated, and this used to be the case. And in my personal opinion, I don't think that is the case anymore. especially with the very newest stuff. I mean, even the Japanese market now is getting cars made in the USA, especially in the Kentucky plant. And the best way for you to see this, don't take my word for it, this is just my opinion, but the best way for you to see with your own eyes the quality control, I invite you to take a trip once the pandemic is over and all this. Take a trip to a factory, either a Kentucky one, Indiana. There's a lot of factories across the United States. They usually do public tours. You can go in, they'll take you on a tour of the plant, show you a few things, not everything, but they'll show you enough for you to see with your own eyes how just unbelievable the level of cleanliness and the level of attention to detail inside these plants. It'll blow your mind, folks. I highly encourage you to do that tour. So Paul says, what are the symptoms for a faulty EGR? My 2010 Prius started to shudder a few weeks ago while driving normally. I had it inspected, replaced, cleaned, just worried it might return. So the EGR thing on the Priuses, and this is a common issue with those. Usually the valve will first start sticking, and where it doesn't close. And EGR valves on any gasoline engine, when it opens, when the engine is at low RPM, idle, a little bit off idle, it'll start misfiring, and that's normal. So these valves never open when they're at low RPM. But when you have that valve sticking because there's carbon buildup on it, that's when the issues start. Cleaning them, a lot of people have cleaned them, and personally I would never clean an EGR valve itself. You can clean the cooler, the lines, all the other stuff, but not the valve itself. But the most important thing, and people that miss this, especially DIYers or independent mechanics, there's a software update that needs to happen that will actually reduce the chances of this reoccurring. If that software update doesn't happen, guess what? It's only a matter of time and we're back to square one. Software update, it changes the way the engine utilizes the EGR, so it would lessen the chance of it getting clogged. So that software update is very important. Otherwise, we'll be back to square one in the same amount of time that you got to the first occurrence. So James says, great channel. Well, thank you for watching, sir. I really appreciate it. What would you recommend for someone wanting a rebuilt 99 Camry 2.2 4-cylinder? Does Toyota offer crate motors? So Toyota has never offered crate motors, actually. They've only offered a short block and then a cylinder head. Honestly, with a Camry like that, I wouldn't buy a new engine because these engines last a very long time. They're one of those that are built to last. But I would rebuild the one that you have or buy a low mileage one and go through it. They're notorious for oil leaks from age. That's just a limitation of them from age, but they're very DIY friendly, and even big major work, we're pulling the engine out and rebuilding it. It's actually a very simple engine to rebuild. I wouldn't be looking, I don't even think Toyota would have short blocks. I mean, you rarely saw short blocks on these, but I would look at used ones with low miles. That's probably your best bet, and go over them, especially all the gaskets. Let's see. So Angel Evangelista says, why you can't buy 75 weight a Toyota dealer for Tacoma transfer case? So that's one that's related to parts. The fluid, the original Toyota fluid that is 75 weight only, is I want to say it was $50 to $80 for a quart, and most of these cars will take 2-3 quarts. I mean, the cost is just monumental, and the fluid you're getting is nothing really special. And dealers figured, well, we're using 75 85 or 75 90 or 85 even W90 for years and years and years on these transfer cases, and we haven't had a single one fail. So why are we charging our customers a small fortune for a fluid that is not readily available anywhere, and we're using this other fluid that works great? And I actually don't recommend you go and spend a small fortune buying the 75W, which is usually never available at dealerships, because no dealership will want this very expensive fluid that nobody buys sitting on the shelf collecting dust. That's why you don't find it very often. I would use 75, 85, 75 W90, or even 85 W90, and you'll have no issues with the transfer case. So Frank says, how much coolant would you get out of a 2AZ if you drain from the engine block? Kind of scared that bolt might snap. So not much, I'm being honest with you. I mean, you drain the radiator, then I remember this from rebuilding hundreds of these. You drain the radiator, then you drain the little drain right by the compressor. Not much comes out. I mean, maybe you'll get a quart of a quart, quarter of a quart, or half a quart, maybe. Estimation here. Not much. And if that bolt, yes, it's pretty scary. It's like a brass made bolt that is designed to break, essentially, in my opinion. I would soak it overnight with some PB blaster and let it sit. Don't crank on it too much because it breaks. You have to replace the whole drain thing. But yeah, not much that makes it really worth it. I wouldn't. I would just drain the radiator and call it a day. Maybe take the thermostat out and let it drain some more, but that's about it. So Wayne says, I have a Tacoma 2010 V6 and the transmission shakes at low RPM going uphill. So first thing that comes to mind with the 2010 Tacoma, your U-joints. I know you say the transmission, but I would check your U-joints. They were somewhat notorious to seize up, and now they cause all kinds of vibration and eventually noise, and eventually we've seen some break. I would look at your U-joints. Transmission shaking, that's kind of hard to tell that the transmission is the source of the shake, because there are so many things that would cause a 2010 Tacoma to shake other than the transmission. So I'd be looking everywhere else, make sure everything else is taken care of. Wheels, tires. Well, you're saying low RPM going uphill, so never mind on the wheels and tires. Drivetrain. U-joints is the first thing I would look at, honestly. But other common problems, I don't see anything common with these other than the U-joints that would cause exactly what you described. So Alan says, I watched your video on the Corolla transmission fluid change. Does the same procedure for checking transmission work for all Toyota Lexus? I want to say all, but there's always that one weird model that doesn't have it. But let's say most. Most your normal models, Toyota bashed, of course, and Lexus bashed, not the Mazda, not the Subaru or the BMW. Yes, that procedure does work for them. Some of them, like I forgot to mention this in the video, actually. Some of them will not flash the D light. Some of them will use the AT temperature light, like especially some of the trucks. But otherwise, they're all the same procedure on the transmission fluid. So Ashley says, what's your opinion on a Toyota Camry hybrid battery degradation? Mine is 2008, but almost 100K kilometers. Fuel economy is not as good as the battery, and the battery never charges to full. So hybrid battery degradation, it starts slowly. It doesn't, that's a little too new, and that's actually low miles. I would be looking at other stuff that are causing your fuel mileage to go down. But hybrid battery degradation happens very, very slowly over time, where you're slowly losing your gas mileage, and that's normal with any battery. That's why you don't get error messages, you don't get problems, because they don't be thinking the hybrid battery degradation that happens slowly over time is an indication that, oh, my hybrid battery is dying, I better get rid of this car. No, that's a normal process that happens. You could be driving this car another 10 years and it's still degrading slowly, but it's not to a point where it's failing. There's a difference between the two. But other stuff for your fuel economy, I'd look at tires, brakes, dragging brakes, incorrect tires, or not eco-friendly or heavy tires. They'll cause your gas mileage to go down. Your driving habit, the temperature outside, the overall general maintenance of the car. There's a lot of things that would affect your gas mileage other than the hybrid battery degradation, especially at that age and that mileage that you have, which is not much. Jose says, any opinion about the Lexus RC300H with a 2.5 four-cylinder? It's a hybrid model. Something about service. That Lexus, yes, it looks nice and all, but it does share a similar drivetrain for most hybrids. Keep up the maintenance. follow the maintenance in your book, and you should really have no issues keeping this car for a long time. Ivico says, I have a 19 Camry. I hear strange noise, a cold start for a few minutes, and then disappears. Is it normal? My guess is, without hearing, it's hard to tell, but my guess would be the direct injection. These engines are very loud, especially if this is a 4-cylinder. You didn't specify. Even the 6-cylinder actually does this. They have 2 injection systems. They have the direct and the port. Every time it switches to direct injection, the engine just changes sound and gets super loud. Then it quiets down. But believe it or not, as you drive the car, it's still doing that switch back and forth. But you just might not notice it as much. But when you start first thing in the morning, they usually start in direct injection, and you hear it very loud, and eventually quiets down. It's not really quieting down, it's just switching the injection mode. So if that's the case, this is completely normal and nothing I would worry about. And I know it sounds odd, the sound, but it's normal. Jesus Miranda says, I have heard you speak about Tundras. Any issues specifically on the 18 SR? I haven't heard you, speak about Tundras. So I'm planning a video shortly on Tundras that will cover a lot of things in depth, just like the buying guides we've done. I'm hoping I can work on this video actually this weekend and have it for next week, God willing. But the 2007, not much have changed. Not much have changed on the Tundra in all its run till now. Just the body stuff and some accessories got added. But stay tuned for that video on specific issues, because this is a long conversation about the Tundras. But overall, they're very reliable cars. So Alex says, 05 Prius that has random misfires. I have changed the plugs. It has new coils. I have a camshaft sensor coming. Is there anything else that could be wrong? Yes, on these Priuses, we've seen injectors popping up these days that just stop working or not work right. And the best way to do that, you do need a good scan tool to do that. You have to change the injection volume. You have to force the car to run rich and run lean, and you see which injector is bad. But the average DIY might not have access to a good scan tool. Swap injectors. They're very easy. They're right there, 212s, and they come out. Swap injectors and see if your misfire follows after the injector. Another thing is clean the throttle body and make sure there's no oil in the intake. That's another one that will cause serious misfires in these. The cam sensor, I highly doubt you'll have a problem with the camshaft sensor. That wouldn't cause misfires, and that would actually cause starting issues more than anything. So Jake says, which is a better choice, 2019 Corolla or 2020 to buy? So Jake, this is a good question. I'm assuming you're in the United States. The 2019 Corolla sedan is the previous generation. The 2020 is a newer generation. Honestly, they're both really good. Price is going to be your factor here, and options. The 19 Corolla is a great car. They have the CVT. It's proven to be really good. We didn't have a lot of issues, especially with the later ones. And the 20 has the CVT with the first gear, which is actually makes for a better driving experience. The 2020 will drive a lot better than the 19. The 19 still drives good, but the 20 will drive a lot better. Really, it comes down to price and your preference of how they drive, but they're both really good cars. I wouldn't put one over the other on reliability. So William says, I have a 96 Toyota Corolla. It uses a lot of gas. It is a 1.6. So that's a little bit of an older one. And cars, they get to a point where their gas mileage just comes down, and there's so many things that you got to start chasing after. Where is it even worth it? Unless there's a running issue, I wouldn't chase after it. I'll be looking at misfires, be looking at the general health of the ignition system. That car had spark plugs and wires that would, the general old school service of an ignition system. Start with that, look at the injectors, look at how's the rest of the car, any brake dragging. Again, we go back to the same thing with fuel issues. But the ignition system on that car is one that I would definitely be looking at. So another question is, would you recommend changing fluid in Toyota hybrid CVT trans? There's no recommendation in the maintenance booklet. Is it really lifetime? How much is such service? Well, that's a good question. And let's talk about lifetime transmission fluid for a second. What is a lifetime? Lifetime, is it 6 years? Is it 4 years? Is it 10 years? There is a lifetime. There's nothing that lasts forever. Humans have a lifetime. So when they say lifetime, that seems to me like a specified amount of life. So if you don't want to find out if this specified life amount is very short, I highly recommend you replace the transmission fluid. You're not going to cause harm by replacing the transmission fluid if you use the correct fluid, which is, in my book, the original Toyota fluid, no other fluid. Um, if you change it, you're not going to cause harm, but now you're in the side of, I did what I can to prolong that lifetime. So on the hybrids, I'd recommend you replace it every 60, 90,000 miles. I'm actually, in the next few weeks, I will be filming a video how you can do that yourself, and you'll be surprised how simple they are. But on the non-hybrids, I would replace it every 60,000, 6 years, no longer than that. Yeah, and that should keep your car going, and you wouldn't have that voice in the back of your head saying, wait a minute, what's the lifetime here? I didn't do any maintenance on the trans, and I'm hoping it lasts long. But take that hope and worry out and just change it, and you'll have no issues. So Cosmin says, is it normal when I switch from P to R, D, or B, feel a small shake on a Toyota Corolla? So it depends. If you're parked on an incline or decline, that's normal. That's why I actually encourage you to apply the parking brake always in this specific order. You're in drive, put the car in neutral, your foot's still on the brake, put the parking brake on, let go of the brake, let the car rest on the parking brake, then put it in park. That way you're not resting the whole weight of the car on that parking pole. Folks, the parking pole is something very small, 2 pieces of metal, and this parking pole goes in between them and just holds the car. You're resting the whole weight of the car on that little guy. And yes, they're really strong, they're really well made, and they're not going to fail prematurely. But every time you park it on an incline or decline, and that's holding the car, when you disengage it from park, that jerk that you feel is it disengaging with force. You do that so many times over years, there is a chance you're going to actually break that guy, and that's not good because that's inside the transmission. The transmission will still work, but park, there's no more park, and that's a problem. So why are we pushing our cars to the limit? I would just use the parking brake. The brakes are designed to hold the car, the parking brakes. The parking pole is not designed to hold the car. It's designed to hold it from rolling, but not continuously hold the weight of the car on it. So I would believe that small shake that you feel is because it's resting on that parking pole. And when you pull it, it'll just shake because now it disengaged with force. So DL says, uh-oh, what happened to the page here? Hold on. Not as fast with these as fixing cars here. Okay, DL, 18, 4Runner. Awesome 4Runner. I love 4Runners. 42,000 miles. Is it worth to get the rear differential roar whine fixed under warranty or just put up with the noise? You know what? If you got warranty, yeah, fix it. Absolutely. But the minute that warranty runs out and now you're the one paying for the bill, I'd say it's not worth it because nothing will really happen in the end. You'll drive it 200,000 miles and still whines the same, and it's like, well, I guess that was not too bad. But if you have it under warranty, you absolutely have it fixed. Why not? It's really not a big fix. It's just a big expensive carrier that gets replaced. But if it's under warranty, why not get your car fixed? Hey, maybe you'll get one that doesn't whine for a long time and you wouldn't have to listen to that noise again. So Naveen says, could you comment on the 1921 Camry owners having premature 12 battery deaths? So the same thing with the Camry as is with the RAV4. The DCM, I spoke about this a little bit earlier, but the DCM, fancy cell phone, stays on when it's not supposed to, drains the battery. There's a software update. Call your dealership, get that fixed. Very simple. They also test the battery. If it fails, they'll replace it. If it needs charge, they'll charge it, and life is good. It's very simple, and they actually have fixed this issue. So Ultra Subway says, I have a CT200H, 589,000 miles. All right, man. That's awesome. It says check hybrid system and shuts off. So check hybrid system. I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly what's going on without checking for codes and seeing what's going on. But that's the first thing I would do. I mean, at that mileage, it really could be anything. Uh, I would check codes, see what's going. It's not going to be your OBD2 codes. There, you're going to have to check the codes on the hybrid system. But any capable scan tool will be able to do that. So Vedav says, I changed my RAV4 oil recently. I use channel lock pliers to tighten the oil filter, which might have pinched it a little. There are no leaks. Should it be worried about? I would. I am worried, actually. Don't use channel locks to tighten. I don't know if you're talking about a spin-on filter or a canister style filter, but from your description, worrying about it being pinched, I'm assuming this is a canister filter, like a spin-on filter. I would be worried. Go replace that filter again. Never use channel locks to tighten filters. Just tighten it by hand till it stops, give it a little crank, and call it a day. Because these filters, once you crush them, they could cause restrictions. The element inside could get distorted. It's not worth it. It's a $5-10 filter. It's not worth the risk damaging an engine because of a $5-10 filter. Don't be alarmed. Just replace it again and don't use channel locks to tighten it, and you should be good. So let's see here. Moses says, on the Prius Prime, how do I tell how many miles I've driven on internal combustion and how many on the electric motor? I don't believe there's an option to tell other than looking at your EV range or distance driven on EV and then subtract that from the total miles of the car. But on that one, I would be careful because you'd want to drive that internal combustion engine frequently. Because remember, some people will say, oh, well, I put stable in the gas tank so my gas wouldn't go stale. Well, what about running the gasoline engine? Gasoline engines, they don't like to sit undriven. Most folks in their normal driving, they will bring the gasoline engine on, but some people will deliberately go not to turn it on, so they would drive it like a Tesla. Don't do that. That's not a good idea. But as far as a very simple way to just clear, crystal clear, this is your engine miles and this is your EV mile, there's not really a direct number like that to speak of. So my 14 Camry touchscreen is not responding on the bottom left side. Is there any factory reset method to recalibrate the screen? Unfortunately, no. This is actually a common problem across all Toyota models. There's a little sector, like one small section, and it happens to be right where, I don't remember what it was. There was something there that continues to get pushed. I believe it was the continue button. When you start the car, it shows that message and you have to hit continue. That's something happens in the screen. That pixel dies there, and now it doesn't work. There's not really a reset because this is a hardware problem with the screen. If you know somebody that fixes radios and screens, they could fix that. It's not a big deal. But unfortunately, your only option from a dealership side is to replace the whole unit. That's just the way they are, unfortunately. We've seen that a lot. That is very common. More common than you think on a lot of models, not just the Camry. So how can one tell if the rear stabilizer bar links need to be replaced, especially if there's no obvious play in the ball joints? Any quality difference between OEM and aftermarket? Okay, so rear sway bar links, I always say don't replace parts that you think are bad. If you don't have symptoms, don't replace them. But I'm assuming you have noise, and the easiest way with sway bar links, if they are original, is to hold the sway bar, hold the link, and just move them back and forth. Sometimes very little movement is all it takes to make a lot of noise over bumps. So on that one, I don't know what car you are referring to, but I would check them. If they're aftermarket moorings are horrible. Not all of them, but most of them that I see, especially the ones with the Zerk fitting. Why do we need a Zerk fitting on a sway bar link that never came from the factory, and now you're adding a place for dust and stuff to go inside the joint? If you're in doubt, replace them. Or there's another better way, diagnosis-wise. Remove the sway bar, take it for a ride if you have a like a noise concern over bumps. Take both sway bar links off. You can tie the sway bar somewhere or just remove the whole sway bar. Now, some models are harder than others. That might not be possible. But the sway bar link, disconnect it and drive the car. If it doesn't make the noise, then you know for sure that's your problem right there. But I would use OEM if you're keeping this car long. If you're using aftermarket, really shop around for good ones because there are a lot of bad ones out there. Let's see. 1920 4Runner suffer from failed needle bearings in the front diff, like earlier models. You know what? No. Technically, they are the same setup in the same car, but I believe they got the updated parts. And because I don't know who assembled these differentials, and Toyota is not always clear about their what parts they use in what car, other than what they public to us. But the failure rate on these is almost none. I haven't really seen any 19 or 20s that have this issue, so I'm assuming they are fixed and they had the updated parts from the factory, but time will tell. And this is not really a big repair that I'm too worried about, even if they do still have it. 4Runner is awesome. I have to say that on every occasion. Steve S. Thank you for watching my channel, sir. I really appreciate it. Susan, thank you so much for your super chat. I really appreciate that. So the car guy, I love that name. So what do you think about the used Lexus GS 450 1215? I live in Europe and I'm looking for a good used hybrid. Any specific issues with these? So that's a really good car, but just one thing about the IS and the GS in general. Their suspensions and their brakes tend to be a little bit more on the pricey side than your average front-wheel drive Toyota. They're a lot harder to work on, but they're also less likely to break. That's a good car if you can find one in good shape. That car is very fast, and finding one that hasn't been crashed or abused can be tough because people who like them take care of them. They usually keep them for a very long time, and finding those used and readily available in good shape is hard, but they're absolutely good cars to watch for, to buy, but watch for just overall condition. Suspension is one. Brakes are expensive, and they do wear out a lot. Suspension stuff, especially some of those had an active sway bar and all this complicated stuff. Make sure all of this stuff works and it's never been in major accidents. Well, all this stuff has been damaged. So Roy says, 2020 RAV4 hybrid battery never seems to charge more than 50%. So one thing about watching that charge indication, it is not an indication of a health of the battery. Actually, 100% fully charged on that little indication and no charge is not representative of 100% and zero. It's just a range, the operating range, if you would. I wouldn't be looking at it. I always want it to be full. You'll rarely see it full, actually, unless you're pushing for it to be full. On most hybrids, you really have to push the envelope to get it to fully charged. You have to drive on the highway hard on the brakes to let it regenerate braking. Then it'll go to full, and then you've done all this spectacle, and then the first time you accelerate, it drops down. That's just the way they are. I wouldn't be worried about it, if you would, too much. So Michael Hoffman says, if spending $32K new Camry XSE or a little used Avalon or ES350, I know you work for Toyota, but should I stay away from Volkswagen? Oh, absolutely, you should. Please do. If you're spending that much money on a car, I would at least want to buy a car that you know is going to last 10, 15 years without breaking your bank in the process. Hey, you buy a Volkswagen, it's a great car as long as you keep dumping infinite amounts of money into it to keep it going. They're just the way they are. Volkswagens are not the most reliable cars. There used to be a day where they were great cars. Not anymore. That day has long gone. And I highly encourage you not to buy a Volkswagen. You want to buy a Volkswagen? Lease it. That lease ends. Throw it back at the dealership. Move on. You want to... This is something that I don't understand about leasing a Toyota. You buy a Toyota to keep it for 10, 15 years and not really spend much on it. If you're leasing it, you're not really you're paying this high price. Look, Toyotas are more expensive than most other companies for a reason. You're spending this high price and then moving on from the car in 3 years. I don't know. Everybody has their own situation, but definitely stay away from Volkswagen. Toyota and Volkswagen, other than their little fight on the who makes more cars every year, they're not even the same planet of reliability. So just a note for you: please buy that Avalon or Camry or even ES350. They're not even the same planet as the Volkswagen reliability wise. So I bought a Fenza Stargaze roof shorted out. Now there is a burn mark in the glass roof. I have not seen this one, and I'm very interested in this one. If you don't mind, take a picture of that and send it to me. Um, Usually, I would put this as an early production thing because this is a new feature that's coming out. I wouldn't be worried about it reoccurring. I haven't really heard it. Haven't really heard it on the internal channels where people always talk, technicians and um, product engineers. But do send me a picture of that burn if you please don't mind, so I can document it and we can look into it. But very simple. Go to the dealership. They'll take care of you. They'll probably give you a loaner and or a rental car, and they'll get it fixed for you. So Andre says, are there any reliable Toyota Lexus products with air or hydraulic suspension, or are all hydraulic air suspension problematic? Asking for a retiree who wants smooth, trouble-free last car. So air suspension and hydraulic suspension, they do exist in Toyota models. More on the Lexus side, especially air suspension. Very few models that on Toyota with a Toyota badge that has air or hydraulic. Namely, hydraulic is the older line cruisers. Air suspension, some of the Sequoias, some of the models just scattered there will only have rear. There's not a Toyota model that has full-on air suspension front and back and one of those very soft rides. Not really, but for your retiree who's looking for a very smooth, trouble-free last car, I would recommend the Avalon. It's a beautiful riding car, and it's very reliable, and it doesn't have air and hydraulic. Look, folks, air suspension is beautiful, beautiful, but it's air in a bag. It's only a matter of time before something leaks, and now we have to fix things. Doesn't mean it's going to cost a fortune always. Lexus has them. They're very reliable, but eventually when they do break, they do get to be pretty expensive compared to a car with just shocks and springs. So going into a hydraulic suspension car or a air suspension car with the mentality of it'll never break, life will be great, is not, you're not setting yourself up on a good way here. It's going to happen, but are you willing to pay the price for this very smooth and beautiful ride? That's the mentality you should have going into a car with this suspension. You do that, you're not going to be disappointed when things break because you appreciate it. So can I run my '07 Camry 4-cylinder with no air intake duct? I wouldn't, because you're going to get all kinds of dust inside, and that dust eventually ends on top of the piston. And then you get a big enough objects or a lot of things, you're going to start wearing things prematurely. I wouldn't. When you say air intake duct, I assume you mean the intake hose going to the throttle body. Now, if you're talking about that little, whatever you call it, like the one right by the battery, yes, that's just to channel the air better for the engine, but that still gets filtered before it goes. And on these cars, you can't run them without a mass airflow. They'll just not run right. Tech Librarian, hey man, how you doing? Good to see you. I'm glad you could join us. So, FPV Flyer, thank you so much for joining us, sir. I appreciate you coming in. Jake says, I have a 2010 Lexus HS250H at 180K and was wondering if it's worth buying a new battery. Not sure how long this car can last in general. So these cars are good. That, if I'm not mistaken, does not have the 2AZ, and I don't quote me on that one. If your engine is not burning oil, if the car is generally in good shape, and if the battery is failed, it's really tough for me to say buy it or don't buy it, because it has miles. It's a little bit older, starting to go into that 10 plus years. Um, if the car overall is in great shape, then it's worth it. But if it has issues and oil leaks and it burns oil and it does this and does that, then perhaps it's not worth investing in a battery. That's just my opinion. So Rocky says, oh, sorry, that was not a question. Let's see. So my 2007 2.4 liter Camry lights flicker a little bit. What could it be? Alternator, alternator, alternator. So Toyotas will have their voltage regulator, the little guy that stabilizes the voltage, because the voltage could go up and down with load. The guy that stabilizes the voltage and keeps it all in one even level, so you won't see that flickering, that's built into the alternator. If you have an aftermarket alternator, or you have a very old original alternator, that little voltage regulator could be failing. It's causing that uneven voltage, and now everything is flickering. Um, I would look first before replacing that alternator. Actually, make sure your grounds are good, your battery is good. Make sure your especially on grounds, the negative terminal is clean. That we've seen that causing flickering when it's really corroded and bad. But if everything else checks out fine, there is likely an alternator. Uh, if it's an original alternator, 13, 14 years old, I'm not too upset to replace it at this point. And they're very simple to replace, to do DIY. So Sharmila says, do you have any idea when Toyota will resolve the recall on the Sienna about the fuel system? So I'm assuming you're talking about the fuel pump. There's actually been a recent release of these recalls. Folks, on the fuel pump recall, I'm just going to say this shortly here. This is not a problem. I don't want people to freaking out about, oh, we're going to be continuing doing fuel pumps and we have fuel system problems. That's not the case. The fuel pump has a manufacturing problem. It fails prematurely. Toyota is not happy. They don't like it. We're going to replace all the fuel pumps with a different fuel pump that is back to Toyota standard, where even the car in the rotting in the junkyard has a good fuel pump. That's what it is. You're going to replace it once and you're done. That's what that recall is. It's not a continuous problem. It's going to keep coming up. Fishing Guy says, top the things to consider for 2011 Tacoma Limited. Did oil change at 1K? Sorry, I thought so. General thoughts on the third generation motor in the Tacomas. 2021 Tacoma. Sorry, guys. The light here is not the greatest. I'm trying to read off the screen. So 2021 Tacoma Limited. That generation Tacoma, when it first came out, 2016, it was the worst launch of any model. I'll just flat out say this honestly. Sorry, Toyota. You know what I'm talking about. So it had so many TSBs and problems and issues and things not working right, and the product engineers were just freaking out, like, oh my god, we have so many things, and they're not big things, just little things that just keep adding up and adding up. But by 2021, there's actually a very solid truck, because all these issues got resolved. 16, 17, as we went to 18 and 19, everything was quiet. And this is, again, a 2021. You will have zero issues with this truck. Take care of it. It'll take care of you. But remember, it's a truck. It'll need a little bit more maintenance. The brakes will wear out faster. It generally needs, more fluid maintenance. Has a real transfer case if it's all-wheel drive. Keep up the maintenance on these, and you will have no issues. A transmission in that thing is solid. That's one thing that never had issues. Everything else in 2016 was a little messy. I'll come up with a video on that. I'm contemplating, because the Tacoma guys will hate me a little bit, but I'll just tell you the truth about that. So Muhammad says, why the 8-speed transmission is in the Camry V6 is very aggressive when the car is not warmed up in the morning. So the 8-speed is a topic on its own, and I'm contemplating making a video about that one specifically. But the 8-speed is different than all the transmissions that Toyota have made. They call it direct shift. It's a little bit on the aggressive side, and it does things a little bit differently than your average 6-speed or 5-speed transmission. Short answer to you, Mohammed, I would say that's normal. If you have an 18 Camry, however, some of these aggressive shifts when it's cold could be not normal, and a software update would fix those. I would look at the software updates, ask the dealership if they have any software updates, have them done. But I'm with you. It is an aggressive shift, but it is a normal shift. Actually, most other makes, they will have aggressive shifts when the transmission is cold. And if you're worried about damage, give it a little bit more time to warm up, and you should have no issues. So, CHR hybrid, can I keep the 12-volt battery topped up by just leaving the engine on for 20 minutes each day when not driven much? So 20 minutes is not going to do a lot for the battery, but I'm more worried about the rest of the car. If you're going to store it, 20 minutes, maybe it'll be okay. Perhaps a little longer, but I'm worried about the rest of the car as well. I would drive the car for 20 minutes. That would actually do a lot better for the car. Not every day, maybe every other day, every 3 days. That'll do a lot more for the car than just the 12-volt battery. So 2017 Sienna engine oil leak, not use stop leak. Do not, folks. Oh, every time I hear the word stop leak, I freak out. Do not use stop leak ever, ever with Toyota or with any other car. And I know somebody will jump up right now and say, oh, I used it, it fixed. Here's what stop leak does. It clogs the leaks to stop them. But here's what it also does. It clogs the leak, it stops the leak, and it clogs everything else that was working properly. Folks, this worked in 1955 when the 55 Chevy had a 350 small block and life was good. This doesn't work with these modern engines with small oil passages that go to the variable valve timing. It doesn't work with these systems. I mean, I can just even picture the newest Toyota 4-cylinder engine with all its magnificence of technology with a stop leak. Disaster waiting to happen. If the car leaks, you have two options. Let's keep it very simple. Watch your fluids. So when it leaks, it doesn't run down and you wouldn't have issues with low fluids. Keep topping it off. That's your first option, and not fix it. Clean the leak, see how bad it is, or go from there. Or the best option to stop the leak is to fix the leak. That's the best way. I understand this is not simple, and financially this could be a burden, but if financially it is a burden too, and you're not able to fix the leak at the moment, at least keep an eye on the fluid that is leaking, but don't use stop leak. If I wouldn't be here if everybody put stop leak in their car to stop the leaks and never fix them. Let's put it this way. That's not a correct repair. Don't use stop leak. I'd rather the car leak than you stop using stop leak. So, how to update the sat nav in Toyota Auris? So, honestly, I love Toyota, but I don't like their navigation. I don't like their updates. They're very expensive, and usually they're outdated the day you update it. It's just the way they are. Some of them will get an SD card. Some of them will be online, or you update it and it downloads a file. Some of them will be a DVD. It depends on the model year of the update, but I honestly don't encourage it. So my 2010 Prius, sometimes load car key detected, not a triangle light shows up and stuff, and it goes away a bit. Should I be worried? No. So I've noticed on some of the smart key models, like you'll have the key in the same spot, and all of a sudden just key not detected, and then it'll come back. One thing I would do is replace the battery in that smart key. That could be the reason. Or some people will have electronic devices that interfere with the signal of that key inside the car. That's another scenario we've seen. But really, no key problems with most Toyotas, especially a 2010 Prius. So David says, do you have any advice concerning 19 RAV4 Adventure's problem with electronic magnetic clutch in the all-wheel drive transfer case? I have the moaning sound, but haven't had it fixed yet. So that's actually a common problem on these, and this is only on the Adventure and the limited models. So the front transfer case that we've had for years since the RAV4 came out, uh, they decided to change it. And guess why they changed it? Of course, fuel economy. And well, they say other things, but it's actually fuel economy. It has two clutches that engage and disengage and just have complete control over the transfer case. There are some issues with those. There are production issues, and I would contact your dealership, get that fixed. It's a TSB, it's really a known repair. But is this going to fail again? I hope not, because most models that had the system, not Toyota, other manufacturers, they've had issues with them, and I hope Toyota follow what they normally do with this one. But get it fixed, and we'll go from there. The cars that have gotten it fixed did not have the issue again. I mean, we're talking about a 2-year-old car at most. Uh, the cars that had it fixed did not come back for the issue. So there's hope. Let's see how that one goes. So 2007 Sienna navigation did not speak street name. Anyone to program. Honestly, that one I would have to look at the navigation itself. It should say the street name, but don't quote me on that one because that one is a little older, and we don't see them as often that I would know exactly where to go for that one. So Sportsman says, just test drove a new 2020 RAV4 today. Tell me if the 2.5 and the 8-speed trans is going to be reliable. Will this be as reliable as my past Toyota 2002 Sienna 01 Tundra 05 Tacoma? So I'll tell you the truth here. I think this is going to be a reliable car, but I also would like to say, comparing the new cars to the very old cars where they were basically a very, very simple car with nothing really advanced, or it's just a humble old car they just kept driving, is not a fair comparison because you have so many systems, there's so many features that are newer that might need updates here and there, might need little calibrations here and there. But the engine itself, I think, has been reliable if taken care of. The biggest thing with these new engines, you absolutely have to maintain them a lot more than the previous ones. Doesn't mean you have to dump a lot of money into them, but you gotta stay on top of that maintenance with these new cars. The 8-speed transmission, the RAV4 seems to have the least issues, but it does drive weird, and that deters people from these cars. It's a good transmission. We really haven't seen issues with the RAV4 on the 8-speed trans. But if you like the car, it is a reliable car, because if you buy a 2020 RAV4 and it turns out to be not reliable, you're buying one of the most reliable. So that means other car manufacturers could be a lot worse. So no, they are very reliable. I wouldn't worry about it, but make sure the maintenance is kept perfectly, because trust me, these cars, the old cars, they were forgiving. You could neglect the maintenance and get away with it. But these newer ones, you neglect the maintenance, you're going to be sorry, because things will start getting very expensive very quick. So Superstar Bella says, what do you think of a used '08 Highlander with 148K for a college student? I don't know about prices, but that's a good car if it's been taken care of, and if it doesn't have any of the disasters that happen with these cars when they're neglected. So that mileage is okay. I typically see those well over 200,000 miles. A college student's not going to be putting extreme miles on a car, and they're so happy they have their own car. They're not going to be picking on every little thing. They'll have a little oil leak here, this little thing won't work, but they're not going to be complaining much as long as the car is safe. These cars are not known to fall apart where they're not safe. They'll have a few issues, but nothing that would make it unsafe. So I would say it is a good car for a college student. That price, honestly, maybe a bit much for the miles in the year. But again, that I'm just comparing for my area. That could be the normal price in different areas. So that's that. So Scotty says, I'm assuming you're saying Scotty Kilmer, on some hybrids, changing the generator costs $6,000. Which one? You know what the best part is? Saying a blank statement like that is not accurate, because generator for which car and what generator exactly? Because hybrids don't have a generator. There is no such term in the whole car. There's a motor generator, which is part of a transmission. You can't just buy the generator, the motor generator itself. You have to buy the whole transmission. That is a very blanket statement. And yes, let me tell you one thing. 2007, and I remember this like it was yesterday. 2007 Camry V6. The water pump went and it blew up the entire engine. It just melted things. The intake manifold was molten on top of the engine. I wish I had a picture to show you. That engine had to be pieced together, piece by piece, under warranty. The whole engine had to be replaced. Everything was damaged. Do you know how much that engine was? That engine was $17,000. That's a V6 that is one of the most reliable engines. Car parts are expensive. Generator costs $6,000, but if it fails after 15 years and 300,000 miles, would you be upset? I wouldn't. I mean, that's the end of the life of the car. Folks, the transmission on hybrids, they're very reliable. Usually accidents or just abnormal operation or flat neglect and abuse destroys them, but they're not going to just fail just because. That's sincerely my opinion. And yeah, price out a very reliable Toyota engine, and you're going to be scared to drive that car because they're very expensive. They're high quality parts, but they're also very expensive. But they also don't fail very often. So there is that. So another question is, can you get Apple CarPlay to 2018 Camry? You said cheers from Australia, and cheers to you, my brother or sister. I don't know about Australia, but in the United States, you can if the radio is capable. It says after update that gets done, but I don't know about Australia. You guys might have a different model radios, different procedures. So I would consult your dealership on that one. But there is hope. It's being done in the United States. I hope it's being done in Australia as well. So 2013 Camry, I'm getting a misfire problem. My coils and plugs are new. What else can I do? So if you have any misfire, any engine needs gasoline, ignition, and compression to run, and air. I would look if your coils, if you have a dead misfire that's continuous, coils first, spark plugs second. Actually, spark plugs first, sorry. Coils, injectors. Not common, but still possible. And then compression. If you have carbon buildup, I actually seen a few cases of 12 to 14 Camrys with carbon buildup. Bad gas and bad driving habits will do that. So I would go after injectors and compression next on that one. Manny Murillo says, I just bought a 2018 Camry SE. It has 65,000 miles. When should I change the transmission fluid? Now, I would say, I usually recommend it around 60,000 miles, 6 years on the WS transmissions, which yours does have. You can go as high as 100,000, but that's pushing it. That's if you just bought the car at 90,000 miles, I'll tell you, replace that thing. But you have 65,000. I would replace the fluid. It's DIY friendly. Don't be afraid of that transmission with the seal, no dipstick. It's nothing. It's not a big deal. If you're worried, you don't want to mess with it, just take it to a dealership and have it replaced, and you'll have no issues. But I definitely would replace it every 60,000 from this point on. R. Kelly says, going to be buying a 2011 ES350 from Carfax. It looks like it had 2 owners. Good. And maintenance was done. Second owner, recent change struts. Anything else I should look out for? So that ES350 is a very good car. First, I'll say that. One thing with age, and I didn't get the miles to kind of estimate how many miles. Oil leaks. That's one on that V6. It's not the end of the world, but knowing what you're getting into, if you would, is a good idea. Carfax doesn't tell you. The Carfax is only as good as the information it gets. So looking at the car itself is important. Changing the struts, that's a good sign. But now, do they put aftermarket struts or original? If it's aftermarket, check it for noise. Notorious on these for quick, especially quick struts. You put them on, now it starts making more noise than it did with the original ones. Check it for oil leaks. Check it how it drives. Check tires, brakes. Just a standard. Nothing that comes to mind that is kind of notorious with these, and it's a bad, other than oil leaks from the engine. which still not at the end of the world, but it would be nice to know before you buy it. Maybe you can negotiate the price, or if that really bothers you, maybe walk away from the car. So Ed Red MC says 2010 Prius, sometimes load key. I think we answered that already. Clark, I have a 2020 Camry LE. In cold starts, I hear some clicking. When it warms up, it disappears and sometimes reappear after a couple of minutes. That's the direct injection. I'm almost sure that's what you're hearing. That clicking is the direct injectors and the fuel pump making noise. It's 100% normal. I wouldn't worry about it. Patrick says, why does my second gen matrix oil drive diff coupling have wiring where the first gen does not? Is it just a sensor, or does it activate the coupling somehow? I'm going off memory here, and the second generation matrix 09 and up, I believe. So it has a similar system to a RAV4, where it has a magnetic clutch that engages and disengages the diff. The first generation had a pretty complicated coupling, but the second generation is a lot more reliable. They do tend to have one thing that really, we've seen a few cases. I hope it's not as common as these two cases, but the coupling snaps off the transfer case side on the front of the car. It breaks, and we've seen those. We've seen a few of those, but we suspect that the car got stuck and it was really pushed hard. That's why it's broke like that, because it's made of aluminum. But the wiring is likely that coupler, that similar to a RAV4. It's like a round magnet that engages and disengages the differential. So, cell tester, what is your opinion of the oil drain plugs with a magnet inside? So, drain plugs with a magnet, it can't do harm, but I wouldn't go out of my way to spend money and put them on, because you're draining the oil. All the metal eventually settles down at the bottom of the pan. The heavy stuff, the little stuff will get caught by the filter, and the very, very fine stuff will not really cause that much harm. We're talking the magnet will catch big stuff, and the big stuff already settles at the bottom of the pan. It wouldn't hurt, but I wouldn't be running to replace it with a magnet one. So Greg says 2020 Avalon Hybrid, 900 miles, only 35 mpg. Sticker says 43. Normal, break-in, possibly break-in. And the other thing is driving habits. We tend to hold the sticker to a standard, and I agree. I buy a car, I expect it to get the same gas mileage that is advertised, but you gotta also understand the sticker number is in perfect conditions, that perfect weather, that perfectly skinny driver, not like me, perfectly skinny driver that doesn't cause any weight in the car, and these perfect conditions that honestly 99% of the times nobody drives like that. That's the problem with the sticker numbers, and they're not cheating. That's what's allowed by the law. So on hybrids in general, you can really get those numbers, but I would give it a little bit more time on the break-in. Check your tire pressure, that's another thing. And then look at your weather. If it's really cold or really hot, you might not be getting that perfect gas mileage, and that's normal. But when the weather gets good, you'll get to a point where it's gonna get that gas mileage that is advertised. So let's see here. Andres says, I have a 2020 RAV4 hybrid. Can I change the AC temperature units from Fahrenheit to Celsius? I would have to look. Don't quote me on this, but I believe you can on some of them. I would have to look, honestly, because that's a customized setting, and there's a lot of customizable features on these cars. And I believe I've seen the Fahrenheit Celsius one, but don't quote me on that. I would have to look into it. So the transporter says, I believe we answered this question. Here we go. Naveen says, have you noticed that the new Toyotas on the TNGA, Corolla, Camry, all shrunk in interior space and cargo capacity? Not really. The only thing I noticed is that they all got lower. I mean, the 18 Camry, when it came out, it was so low to the ground compared to the previous one. A lot of people scraped them. And even to me, lifting these cars, I noticed the height of them the most. And in the TNGA, they did shrink slightly, perhaps, but with better engineering in the interiors, they don't feel smaller. They actually feel, some of them feel bigger. But the biggest thing on the TNGA is that it drops the cars. They're trying to make these cars drive better. They're trying to make these cars more efficient, and their emphasis on better driving. Before, look, Toyota doesn't make the best drivers cars. If you would, they make very good cars and they drive decent and they drive good, but they're not the best handling cars in the world. With the TNGA, they were trying to improve that driving condition or handling or the characteristics of the car. And in my humble opinion, I think they did that very well. They didn't compromise the reliability. They didn't compromise the complicating the car suspensions, but they did a fabulous job in making the cars actually drive much nicer, very smooth, very stable. But as far as cargo space, I didn't really notice that as much. So Mohammed Imran says 2021 Corolla hybrid to install a backup camera and recording purposes. Can we just power from the reverse light for backup camera like non-hybrids, or is there a special? If you've done this on non-hybrids, as far as powering things up, it works. But as a side note, I wouldn't power things from a reverse light. I would use a relay, but that's just me. I'm old school when it comes to electronics. You don't piggyback on another circuit. You always run a dedicated wire and use a relay. But if you've done it in the past and it works, there's no difference with hybrids. Lawrence says, and this is a good one, the Tundra, what do you think the Tundra versus other trucks? Look, other trucks are great. I always say I like GM's trucks. I always say GM makes terrible cars, but they make the best trucks. The Tundra has a lot of heat from other manufacturers. They say it's not a real truck. It's not la la la. Honestly, folks, it's a great truck. Maybe it's not as heavy duty or crazy built like some of the domestic ones, but it's a great truck. Everybody that bought a Tundra has not been disappointed. It's very reliable, and it's actually very reliable because it's ancient. It's been the same since 2007. I know, new body style, people say it changed. It really didn't change. Every time I have one on the lift, here's 2007 and here's 2021. They're exactly the same underneath. There's not a single difference. So the Tundra has its buyers. They're not the same as the typical full-size pickup buyer. They always look at the Tundra and go, this is not a real truck. It is a real truck and it is very reliable. Maybe not as capable as some of the other ones, but trust me, when that capable truck from everybody else breaks down, the Tundra will keep going. They're very reliable, folks. That's the one thing about Tundras. That's where Tundra has the party piece of the Tundra, is how reliable it is. It is just unbelievably reliable. So let's see here. So does the 2021 Corolla hatchback have the transmission issues like the defect on the 2020? I'm assuming you're referring to the defect numbered. I think it was 75 cars had a defect. By the way, folks, there is 75, 2019 or 2021. I believe there were 19 and 20 Corolla hatchbacks that had defective CVT transmissions. 75. That was the number. And we've actually seen one of those. No, they do not have the same issue. That was an isolated production issue that only affected that one singular car and these singular 75 cars, and that was that. I wouldn't be worried buying one of these, honestly. Shane, how you doing, man? Good to see you. Thank you for your super chat. I really appreciate it. So let's read I've seen your channel reference on the Sienna chat forums recently. You might want to look into posting on the forums to view and help more people. Shane, I try to post on, I actually am active on a few forums here and there, but with doing the channel, family, and everything in work. By the way, for those that don't know me, I'll say this. I do work at a dealership Monday through Friday. That I didn't leave the dealership and do YouTube now. YouTube is actually my second thing. My main job is at a dealership. I'm a Master Diagnostic Technician. That's what I do every day. But being active in the forum is difficult because it requires dedication and time that honestly I'd rather dedicate to making content, so it would be then shared to others, and then they would all find information in one place. So let's look here. So 2019 RAV4 seems to hunt for gears when coming to near a stop, taking off again. That's a notorious thing for these for that 8-speed transmission. It's not a problem. It's the way the transmission is, unfortunately. I will be making a video on the 8-speed transmission that will help you better understand why the transmission does that. But it's a long subject. I don't want to take the whole time of the call here. I think I skipped some. I'm wondering, I reached the end of the thing. Hold on. By the way, I have a new laptop, so I'm trying to figure things out here. Still not very familiar with it. All right, here we go. So, thoughts on an FJ Cruiser? Looking to buy a used one, wondering what I might. The FJ Cruiser is one of those cars that is indestructible. They really have very little issues, and they're great trucks. When they stop making it, it's like, wait a minute, what happened? What do you mean you can't sell these? They're not selling well, so we're going to discontinue them. And guess what? The very next year, they stopped selling them. I want to say it was 2014. They shot up in price. So now the 2014 used a year later was costing more than what it was a year ago when it was new. The FJ Cruiser is awesome. The one thing that kills FJ Cruisers is rust. And not just rust. People not taking care of them when driving in rusty environments like Rust Belt, like where I'm from, Chicago. Be careful with that. Don't buy a rusty one. Rusty ones, you're going to have issues. Rusty one that's been taken care of, or one that comes from the Rust Belt that's been taken care of for rust, is okay. But don't buy a rusty one, and you will not be disappointed in an FJ Cruiser. Just be ready to replace windshields every year or so. They seem to go through windshields a lot because of the straight windshield and the weird 3-wiper deal, but otherwise they're great cars. So let's see here. I have a Toyota Auris 2008. How do you remove the tire pressure sign? So I'm not very familiar with the Auris, and these tire lights are going to be different in different markets, but you cannot remove the sign. You can't turn it off, but I would go after fixing the issue that caused it on if it really bothers you, or have a mechanic, I don't know, physically remove the bulb. But I'm not supposed to tell you that because I'm a professional and this is a federal emissions device, but that's really what you need to do. So Cosman says, sorry, answered that one. What's your opinion of the best performance motor from Toyota, the 2JZ, the 2UR, and the 1LR, 3SGTE, or 2ZZ? Honestly, the king of performance from Toyota is the 2JZ. Affordable performance, if you would, and reliability. But other engines that I believe would make good candidates for that is the 2AR FE. The FE part is the problem, but that's also a very good engine, and it has a lot of people that have modified it in the Scion TC side of things. They've gotten really big numbers, and the engine is very reliable, kind of similarly built than the 2JZ. The 2UR, it's good, but it has limitations, I think. It's a little bit on the heavy side. The engine itself is very big and bulky. To put it in any car, it's kind of a problem. The 3S GTE is awesome, but they're a little too old now, and modifying these and finding them in good shape is becoming harder and harder. But they're really good engines. But 2AJZ, without a question, is still the king of performance engines from Toyota. So let's see. I have a 2021 Prius, sorry, not Prime, with some rust on the joints. It has 1,900 miles. I actually messaged you with pictures at 1,200 miles. I don't see this rust issues even in older cars. So depends where you live. If you're in Chicago, that's typical. You know, any exposed metal will have surface corrosion. Just because it looks corroded doesn't mean it's actually rusting. This is surface corrosion, and if you want to prove this theory, take a little bit of water, dump it over your brakes, and leave it there for a couple of days. You actually see rust form right on the brakes. Any exposed metal that gets any moisture on it is going to start having that surface corrosion. That's not an issue, but if you're seeing that other similar cars that are apples to apples, exact same car that you have, does not have the same rust, then look at the conditions where you're parking your car. Is it parked in outside? Is it a Rust Belt car? Do you live in the Rust Belt? If that's the case, consider finding a car wash that washes underneath the car. That's the biggest thing with Rust Belt cars. Not washing underneath the car, you're going to have issues eventually, because all that salt is just going to sit on these cars and eat them alive, basically. So washing that salt off is very important to keep things from rusting and progressing. And if you mentioned you messaged me with a picture, I do apologize. By the way, guys, I have like 200-300 emails to go through. I'm trying my best. I'm trying to keep a 5 to 10 at least emails a day to keep up, but there seem to be coming in faster than I am getting to them. So give me some time on the email. I really appreciate your patience. I will answer every single one. Don't think I will ignore them, but give me some time on those. Let's see. So I have a 2007 IS250 Lexus. Today I started trying the car. The lights on the dash came on, heard 3-4 clicks, and everything died. Battery terminals, key fob are fine. Check them all. Battery. I'll go back to the car battery. You either have a battery problem or you have a terminal that's loose, not making good contact. There's really not much else other than the starter itself. If you are 100% sure that your battery is good and your terminals are good, I would go after a starter. They're kind of hard to get to in this car, but if you could access the starter, tap on it a little bit. While you have someone trying to start the car, tap on the starter and see if that makes it go. If it does, then you know 100% it's a starter. Not very common on these, but still possible. That's the only thing I would think of on that. So Frankie says on a RAV4 Hybrid from 2016, the mirrors won't fold when locking the doors, only from the inside with the motor on. Is it a feature or a setting not checked? On that RAV4 Hybrid, I believe it is not possible to fold them when as an option when you lock the door. Would have to look into the customizations. Perhaps there is an option, but I don't recall one, and I'm almost sure there is no option to do that. So let's see. So Darren says, can I discontinue Toyota Dynamic Cruise Control, go back to regular? Unfortunately, the default is to take me to Dynamic Cruise and car brakes abruptly. Yes. Unfortunately, you can't make it the default setting. You have to every time either press the stock button and hold it for 3 seconds and it'll switch to the regular, or if you have a button, also press that button and hold it for 3 seconds. But there is no way to, and a lot of people have asked about this, there is no way to make it the default. Unfortunately, I would love there was a feature like that, because that gives the car more, gives you more customization of the car, but there is no feature like that, unfortunately. Let's see here. Walter, I own an 08 Toyota Tundra 5.7. I just hit 60,000. Do I need to change the transmission fluid? What do I need to do? Drain and fill that transmission fluid is all we really need on that transmission. I would change it, use WS fluid, and you should have no issues. So let's see. David says, about to change the lower control arms and ball joints on a 2010 RX 450h. Recommended putting ball joints into arms before installing them or after. Do you actually don't even have to remove the ball joints? I would. Sorry, let me read that question again. You are replacing the ball joints. Absolutely, put the ball joints on the car before you install the control arm. I mean, don't install the ball joint on the control arm and then put it in the car. That's why you have those two studs and a bolt that you take out. I would actually leave the ball joint off, install your control arm, because sometimes when you're putting that control arm, the ball joint is kind of in the way and you're trying to fight around it. Install the control arm first, then install your ball joint onto the knuckle first, and then into the control arm. That's what I would do. So Amni says, what do you think about the new Corolla Cross? So the Corolla Cross, folks, some of these models I am not familiar with because they're not sold in the US. The Corolla Cross is actually one that I've looked into. Most of these cars are shared with most of the components in these cars are shared with other models that are sold under different names. I think the Corolla Cross is actually one of the cool ones that I wish we got in the United States here. No Scoth, thank you for your super chat, sir. Toyota says there are genuine motor oil 0W20 is specifically made for our engine, Scion TC 2012. Is that true or just marketing? Toyota, close your ears. Just marketing. They are specifically formulated. So if you take that oil and, I don't know, go use it in a Chevy, maybe that's not a good idea. But is it the only and the best oil there is? That's not the case. It is very good engine oil, and it's actually provided by Mobil 1. And if you're using Mobil 1, there are high chances that you're using actually the same oil. I don't know which exact one it is, but that's just my opinion. I think using good oil is a good idea. If you're not sure what good oil is, you cannot absolutely go wrong using the Toyota branded oil. But just know that Toyota doesn't make oil. Toyota doesn't make any of their fluids. It's always made by somebody to their specifications. But that somebody can also sell you that same fluid under those same specifications. And Toyota doesn't have some special specifications that they're on some of the stuff they do. Transmissions are one of them. But on engine oil, they don't have very demanding specifications. They just want good quality oil for their engines. Journey to Wellness here. Thank you for your super chat, sir. Hey, man, how you doing? I have a 13 Camry XLE, 68K miles. I regularly drive fast, 90 miles an hour. Slow it down there. Well, I should tell myself the same. To get to work on time, 26 miles, mostly open road, no stop. How bad is that for my car? So I actually drove a similar car. Unfortunately, it got totaled in an accident, but I drove exactly the same, really fast. I'm always late, and I work 80 hours. I work a lot, so and I drive about 35 to 40 miles one way every day. So there is nothing that lessens the effects of age and miles on a car than driving highway. You drive highway, it doesn't matter how fast you're driving, you're not putting the same kind of load and demand on this car's powertrain than you are driving city. Stop, go short distances, stop. That wears up the car. But you're driving on a highway, even at higher speeds, your load on that engine is not high. Yes, you might start going through tires, you might start going through wheel bearings, maybe that's pushing it, wheel bearings. But as far as damaging the car, you're actually not. You're doing the opposite. Highway mileage cars always have less wear on them. They usually last longer than exclusively city-driven cars. That's the case with every car. And I don't think you're damaging your car like that. But one thing I will tell you, you have to make sure that car is safe. If you're driving at those high speeds, are your tires good? Are your brakes good? Is all your suspension components good? So maybe I would recommend to you that you have a trusted mechanic go through this car once a year, make sure everything is perfect. If any question of a doubt of any suspension components, make sure you get it taken care of. That way, when you're driving at high speeds, which I actually don't encourage you to do, stay with the speed limit. But make sure you're doing so safely, not knowing your car and doing that. That could be dangerous. All right. So let's see what other question. Real freedom preparedness. We just bought a 2013 Prius 3 model. Is the car... sorry, I'm having issues with the screen here. The car was taken care of. Do you recommend taking the hybrid battery fan out to clean it? So that's a very good question. Whenever you buy a new hybrid, or not a new one, but a used one that is new to you, I recommend the first thing you do is have that fan inspected. You don't have to tear the whole car apart immediately to do that, but maybe use a camera through the vent, go in it, check the fan. If it's clean, great. Slap a filter on and you don't have to worry about it. But if that fan was not clean and you just put a filter, you don't really do much. The damage, not the damage, but the dirt is already there. Then it would make sense to clean that fan, even if it's an expense, even if it's expensive. Clean it, make sure everything's good, and you're starting from a fresh, clean slate. You put a filter and you keep it up. That's what I recommend you do in this case. And Eric, thank you so much for your super chat. Does Toyota ever upgrade its infotainment car after they are issued either over the air or at the dealership? That's a very good question. So if you notice in some of the newer ones, they do have an option for over-the-air update. However, there are still updates that are available at the dealership level where you can't get them over the air. So I honestly don't understand the point of the over-the-air. It makes a lot of sense. They should do that. But then if you have over-the-air updates, why do we still only get dealership-only updates? Don't know. That's how some of these things, the radio department in Toyota land lately has, fortunately, hasn't been the greatest in the world, but some things got to give. If they make the awesome cars that they make, but they make not so good radios, I think we'll take that compromise. That's not so bad. But yeah, the over-the-air updates, they make absolute sense, but that's not happening. We still have to do manual updates all the time. So, Ricardo, thank you so much for your super sticker. Moving on. So, okay, Ricardo, I got your question. I'm sorry about that. I have a 2018 CHR and the engine light came on. The error is pressure control solenoid. Performance stuck off. Is this severe and is it costly repair? So typically I need to look at the error code because pressure control solenoid could be for a couple things, but I'm assuming it's a transmission one. This could be just a solenoid inside the transmission that got clogged. I don't know the miles on this car, but if it has high mileage, I would look at that fluid. This is usually the first signs of that lifetime fluid going south. But there is a solenoid inside your transmission, and that solenoid controls the overall pressure of the transmission. If that solenoid is getting stuck, is starting to have issues, you'll get that code. The first thing I would do with that code is erase it. Doesn't come back, because it could be a one-time thing where it got stuck momentarily, set the code, and now it's free and it's fine. That's why I recommend you erase the codes first. Then, if it comes back, deal with it. Solenoid, not very expensive, somewhat of an involved replacement, but nothing that's going to break the bank to replace that solenoid inside the transmission. You do not have to remove the whole transmission from the car, just the oil pan, valve body, and it's right there. All right, guys, so I think we're getting closer to the end of the live stream. I will take one last question and ask something that I always do here. I will take the last question. X Wonder. My Camry reached 63,000 miles, never changed the transmission fluid. Using the drain fill method, how many times do I need to do it? Once. Folks, people ask me this all the time. Well, I'm going to change my transmission fluid 6 times because I need to get every last drop out of it. That's not the point here. The point here is you want to replace the transmission fluid. You want to replace enough of the transmission fluid so you renew the additive package. You keep things fresh. We're not looking to have that bright red fluid that is beautiful. We're looking to have protection for that transmission. So yes, if you want to repeat it multiple times, that's fine, but I wouldn't waste my time or money. Just do it once, call it a day. 60,000 miles later, do it again. You won't have any issues. Folks, thank you so much for joining the live stream. I would like to say one thing before we close the live stream. For my regular followers and for everybody that watched this live stream, thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining. It's my pleasure to help you guys with anything that I can help you with. You guys also help me a lot. I would like to invite you to follow me on Instagram. I have made a small pledge, and I'll make it again here. On Instagram, I'm going to start posting hopefully daily, and I'll show you more sneak peeks like through my work every day. I'll show you the jobs that I'm working on. I'll show you some interesting engines torn apart, transmissions torn apart, and things that wouldn't make sense to post them all the time on videos. So if you're not following me on Instagram, it's at the Car Care Nut. Follow me on Instagram, and you'll see a lot of sneak peeks from when I do the work. So guys, once more, thank you so much for watching my live stream. May the Lord bless you and keep you, and we'll see you in the next live stream.